Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Foster, and I'm the Director of Information Services here at William Penn University, and it is my great pleasure tonight to introduce tonight's speaker for the Ignite Leaders Speak series, Dalton Shaull. Dalton is an Oskaloosa native and a young man that I've known most of his life through our church and Central United Methodist Church and our two families' shared passion for Oskaloosa football. He's the product of a wonderful extended family, the Lewises and the Shaulls, who I know are very justifiably proud of his many accomplishments. Dalton has always been a very intense young man who learned at an early age to set goals and then work with great passion to fulfill them. Because of his commitment, he's been a strong leader in every setting I've ever seen him in. A few years ago, I had the chance to visit with Dalton at his sister's graduation party, and he told me about a project he was working on to improve the process of matching available organs with patients. We talked about some of the technical issues involved, and I was impressed with Dalton's focus on the concept, his curiosity about things he didn't yet know, his passion to see the concept through, and most of all, his motivation to do something that would make a positive difference in the world. Tonight, Dalton will tell us about his inspiration and journey in creating HeathTech Solutions, the IT startup company he co-founded with the goal to create a more effective organ procurement process. Its original product and first innovation is called TXP Chat, and it's an app that secures communication between organ transplant industries and clinicians. Dalton and his co-founder, Eric Paul, launched their company in 2016 out of the Bedell Entrepreneurship Learning Laboratory at the University of Iowa. Since then, Dalton has been named interim CEO/president of the company, and both founders were named to the 2018 Forbes 30 Under 30 list in healthcare. Please join me in a warm hometown Oskaloosa welcome for Dalton Shaull.
Awesome. Good start. My mic fell off. All right, can you guys hear me? Good? Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come back to my hometown where it all started and tell a story about how I got to where I'm at now. And you're going to get a full story, much more than just about the company. I will share stuff about the company, but I wanted to give, even to the people that have seen some of my presentations in the past, I wanted to give something completely new, completely different, completely original. Talk about some of the things I learned through not just HeathTech Solutions, but there's been several companies. It's not like I just had one and picked a lucky one. I've had a couple of other passions and ventures and projects that failed miserably, and we'll talk about some of those and some of the things I learned there too as well. So success, and there's a lot of like cliche equations for success, but I like to pick one that maybe doesn't at first make sense and then explain how I see it. So success equals abundance and perspective. So what's that mean? I don't know if you've seen this movie, but it's a Baby Mama, and this is one of my favorite scenes. But it's this law of attraction, if you will. This idea that I create this emotion of abundance in everything that I see and I look at, and thus opportunity comes to me. And so we're going to do an activity right away. It's going to feel very uncomfortable, but that's part of the reason why you're here, or is why I'm here, is being uncomfortable. So we're going to do an activity. One of the things that we do when we go into a conference with one of our advisors, Michael Moon, who's a San Fran guy, which is probably why it's weird a little bit. This is a San Fran activity. But before we go into a conference, we look at each other and we say, Michael, may you have abundance in all that you do today. May you be fearless. May you see opportunity in everything that you do. And we kind of have this little pep talk back and forth to each other to get ourselves primed into a frame of which we go into a conference not shy or not reserved, but seeing abundance in everything that we do, seeing opportunity in everybody that we talk to, and to facilitate and network which is the reason that we're there in the first place. So turn to your partner or to your left or right or et cetera, and I want you to just to say, I just want you to say, may you have abundance today. May you learn something today that makes a positive impact in your life. And maybe we shorten it down and say, may you have abundance, and maybe you just say, may you have abundance. We'll keep it really easy. We'll make it really easy. Thank you. All right, good. We just synced the room. Now we're all on the same level. We're all here to learn. We're all here to find opportunity, and I hope that the things I talk about today will have some kind of personal impact in your life. You'll be able to see or make a connection that you didn't expect you were going to make when you came here. The next activity is something that I learned from a man that I respect a lot, who's actually in the room, Joe Crookham, on the spot. Sorry, I didn't warn you for this, but this is an activity that he taught me, and I do it even in our company today because I like it so much. And I'm going to pick on people that I know in the front. That's your fault. So I'm going to do an activity. I'm going to hold up my hand, and then Bryn, you're going to be my other participant. I want you to forget these fingers as a part of the experiment. I did this with Olivia, and I asked her how many fingers I was holding up. She's like, well, left hand or right? And it's like, just this hand. This hand, tell me how many fingers I'm holding up. And obviously, you probably can guess because you know what a human hand looks like, and you have probably a good understanding of what it is. But nonetheless, you're not exactly sure. It's a guess, right? So how many fingers? Okay, so 3 fingers. He guessed 3, which is an adequate guess. And then Bryn counting all fingers and okay. So also how many digits? I should put it that way. See, so how many digits? Okay, so 4 digits. But it's not directly it's not obvious. You have to kind of use some intuition or make a conclusion and a hypothesis based on what you've learned and what you know about the human hand. Bryn. Is it very easy to count how many fingers I'm holding up? Right? How many? 4. So the whole point of that exercise, and that's something that Joe taught me, is when we're sitting around a table and we're sitting around making decisions in a company, and I ask you how many fingers I'm holding up, it's immediately obvious to Bryn because she can see it perfectly. She can count them. Whereas you're making an assumption based on what you know, and so the whole point of the exercise is that every single person's perspective is incredibly important to making the entire picture whole. And so that's another thing, too, is I want you to abandon your perspectives. There's a quote I like by a man who's, I can't pronounce his name, I'm not even going to try. But this is up on our office, or this is up on the wall in our office, and it says, in order for things to reveal themselves to us, we need to be ready to abandon our views about them. And so that's the goal here is I'm going to bring up different perspectives. I'm going to challenge you to think about things differently. And hopefully you come away enlightened. I call it putting your angels to work. And what do I mean by putting your angels to work? Our goals for today, and I want you guys to repeat these after me. I want to hear us. Can you see this? Hopefully. If you can't, if the back, I guess you're exempt if you can't see it. Our goals for today. Repeat after me, and we'll just read through them together because you guys can read it, right? So, starting with number 1, I want to hear a story that will be able to relate to. Number 2, I want to leave feeling inspired. Number 3, I want. Number 4. That's putting your angels to work. So what we've just done is we've taken your subconscious mind and we've primed them to now take these goals. You've accepted these goals by stating them, whether you know it or not. Your subconscious mind has just accepted that these are goals that I want to get out of this competition or out of this presentation today. You've internalized them. you've internalized them, you now have shown, now by repeating them and basically hijacking your own self-conscious by repeating those and making them yours, you have now assigned ownership to some of these goals today. And now we're all aligned and cohesive as a unit. We have just created a tribe, and that's how you create a great company. It's being able to take these ideas, to make everybody see them as their own, and move together as a tribe, as a company, as one unit. So I wanted to start with some of those just to set the frame for today's discussion. And now I'm going to move into my personal story of how did I get here. So this was my life for a long time. Through this perspective, I saw my entire world. Football was how my personal success in my career, in football specifically, is the perspective that I went through a lot of things in my life up until I stopped playing football. So this friends, family, what I considered to be important, what I considered to be a high priority in my life, how I viewed everything was how do I get myself to Division I football and thereafter. And I was very, very focused on it, almost too focused, right? And this was who I was. I was a football player, and I had gone to Iowa and ended up and worked. So all through high school, worked laser focused on playing football and getting to Iowa, and then I got there. And it was kind of one of those feelings where you work really hard to get there, and then you realize that it's just not quite what you thought, or maybe it wasn't quite enough, right? And so I'm sitting there and just remembering thinking to myself, wow, do I really want to be doing this? Do I really want to be spending my life and as much time as I was spending in football? Do I really want to be spending this much time in football? I was seeing some of my friends that weren't in sports studying, going to the library, going to tests, going to job fairs, and I wasn't doing any of that. And I thought to myself, I mean, is this football, is this really something that I want to do the rest of my life? Probably not. But as much time that I had put into it, I kind of continued to focus down the path of football, regardless of whether I thought that was really, internally what I wanted to do. And I think I would have continued down that route hadn't I been forced to change. And this day changed my life forever. It was a day that I woke up from that perspective of being in football, being a football player. Everything my life was about football. Who I was a football player. To now realizing very quickly that things were going to be different. I was in a motorcycle accident following practice. I was on my way home from practice at Iowa. Last thing I remember was turning onto Sunset and getting on Highway 1, and that's it. And I woke up to this, fixing my forehead, looking down, and I remember seeing my leg that had not been in traction at the time, I don't believe, but had been, pretty, was torn up, and I kind of remember thinking, this is not good. I think I'm pretty hurt, but still, not really aware. This probably had something to do with drugs, and then also had not recreational, had something to do with the anesthetics and stuff. But even after that, I just remember kind of waking up and being like, hey, I'm all right. Like, hey, chill out. It's like I remember seeing people cry, and I'm like, hey, man, it's okay. Whoa, geez, everybody's crying. What's going on? I see I'm a little banged up, but hey, I remember. I don't remember much. Actually, I don't remember anything at all. These are all kind of handed down stories. There was a story of me who had just wanted to make sure that coach knew that I probably wouldn't be able to make it to lifting the next morning. And they're like, yeah, I think you're all right. I think he understands. That's a big part of where I struggled. But even in this struggle, even after getting smoked in the head, and what I look back now is like a huge wake-up call, I still hadn't learned yet. And so I saw this as another sport. I saw it as a competition of, hey, how can I get better? How can I get stronger again? How can I get back out on the field? And it was kind of one of those things where I began to, over the course of the next 48 months, realize that it was going to be very difficult and probably not possible. I knew my body had been permanently changed. And I just kind of, still, again, trying to push it. Oh my God, I spent my entire life doing this. I can't possibly change now. It's too late. This is all I know. This is who I am. This is my identity. Keep going. Keep working hard. Keep fighting. Go, go, go. And that's what I did. The same relentless intent that I had when trying to get to football, I had the same exact relentlessness to try to get back. And then there was a couple experiences that I had, and I think it was. So I was forced to change, right? And I go through this doubt and refusal. I go through this not wanting to change my identity. And then I kind of come into this awakening moment where I realize that, okay, well, maybe things aren't, maybe there's a different path for me here. Maybe this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe I should do something else. And I would shove it, and I'd kind of play back and forth with the idea of doing something else, or saying, maybe this isn't, maybe I can't ever play again. And then, no, you're fine. Keep working hard. Keep lifting. Your arm will come back and everything. And then there was a specific experience where, so now we're 8 months post-accident. I needed a nerve transplant. My arm was paralyzed, but I had gotten back bicep and I had gotten back arm and movements. And the doctors were like, oh, your physical tests are great. Your muscles are coming back, which was good because that meant I could get back on the football field again. But we would do EMG tests with like a needle into the muscle itself, and the muscle wouldn't give back any feedback or response. It was completely paralyzed still, wasn't getting any neural input. So I had been moving my arm and learning how to move my arm completely off of muscles that I was compensating for my deltoid. And that was because I went straight back into Iowa football. I continued to train with Doyle as if I had a deltoid, and I didn't. And so I was able to move my arm and pass the test and show improvement, but they said, hey, if you ever got into an injury where these other muscles were to be damaged, for example, your rotator cuff, which is doing a lot of this movement, as you grow older, what you risk by not having a nerve transplant is you have that risk of that muscle atrophying to the point where it's unrecoverable, and then should you injure other parts of your shoulder that you're currently using it to move your arm with, you could result in total shoulder and arm paralysis. So the option was that they put in front of me was you could have a nerve transplant, which would give us a shot to get that deltoid back, or you could risk it and wait longer and potentially never get any of it back, but potentially get it all back naturally. And the plus side here is if you get it back all naturally, you can play football again, right? So we waited forever. We went through multiple, we'll wait. And then eventually they came to a point where they said, if you don't do something now, this is kind of it. You either do a nerve transplant now, or your muscle's now at a point where if it doesn't get neural input, it will atrophy permanently, and then it doesn't matter if you get a nerve transplant or not. It's just not going to work ever again, and so you will have a paralyzed shoulder if it's not coming back on its own. And so I decided to go ahead and move forward with the nerve transplant. They told me, that hey, this surgery, you're not going to be able to play sports again or football again. This is kind of, that was kind of their cutoff point. It's like, yeah, you can continue to try to get it back on your own, but if you have the surgery, it's just done. And so that was kind of a tough decision. I remember being in the doctor's office with my dad and having the doctor say, honestly, I think you should just do the surgery because it's just not realistic to where your shoulder is. You just won't be playing football, ever again. And so I was like, I don't know, maybe I could prove him wrong. And after kind of some self-reflection, and I've made the decision to have the transplant, went up to Mayo Clinic, had the transplant done. Following the surgery the next morning, I woke up and they said, it's such a good thing that you did the surgery. We had ended up using more nerve than we originally thought. The damage was worse than we originally thought. This would have never came back on its own. And so, although that was a sign of relief, like, well, glad I did it, I was then immediately had to start addressing the situation that I've been putting away for a long time, which was now you have a choice. Now you have been forced to make a choice to leave football, and now you have an identity change that you need to deal with. And so I remember going back to Iowa. One of the first things that I had to do was go and talk to Russ, who was the football trainer. And I remember going into the training room, and a lot of my buddies being, hey, what's up, man? How's it going? Hey, good job with the surgery. Like, yeah, we'll see you back out there, right? How's the arm doing? And it's like, it's like if you would have asked me 2 months prior, anybody that asked me, hey, how's your arm doing? It's doing great. Yeah, I'll be out there. Just don't worry, another couple months, I'll be back out there. So I had all these people coming up and being like, hey, yeah, when are you gonna be back out there? And it's like, I'm not sure. Maybe I don't know. And I went into Russ's office and sat down, and he had the paper, and he's like, this is, how you doing? How's the surgery? Looks good. Yeah, everything's feeling good. So, yeah, it's good, going good. He's like, all right, well, we better get this signed. We got practice soon. So, yeah, we'll sign that. And I just remember sitting there looking at it, and and I just knew that paper, I signed it, and that was my signing my identity away. Everything I knew was going to be over with the signature. And so I kind of felt like I was, at that particular point, signing my life away, and I kind of sat there for a little bit, and he noticed that I was hesitating. And he goes, man, I'm so sorry. And I said, no, it's all good, Russ. Shit happens, and I signed the paper, and I got out, and I was still very frustrated at the time after leaving that, why I kind of had that why me, poor me type of attitude. And this is kind of what I felt like. I remember leaving the football office like, well, what the hell do I do now? Everything is, I knew that everything that I knew and worked on was no longer relevant, really. And so I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I went through a stage and battled depression, and kind of went through, I had great friends, great family. But I took my, I took my frustration out on artwork. And so I would go home and I would do a lot of art. At the time, I hadn't messed around with charcoal, and I ended up in a college class. I said, what the hell? I took an art class, and I signed up for an art class in college, and I was introduced to charcoal, and I remember doing it one time, and the art teacher came over and was like, wow, not bad, like, nice job, and yeah, thanks. I just kind of felt like I felt good, right? And so I started doing a lot of charcoal drawing, and that was my way to release energy, pain, suffering that I was feeling inside through art. And so I started doing art and got good at it. And the art teacher there helped me out through a couple of things. And my dad had always taught me how to draw, particularly faces. And so that's what I started to do. I picked up art. I said, why not art? And so after drawing a lot of sappy stuff for a while, I eventually thought, okay, well, I'm good at this enough now where I could start drawing people's faces. And so I started an LLC called Shark Art, and it was called Shark because prior to that, I had tried to start a boating, I'll talk about that later. But I had this idea of shark. It was like S-H-A-U, like my name, Shaull, but shark, right? And so anyway, I applied it to the art thing. I was like, what the hell, Shark Art? Horrible name. But anyway, started because I don't draw sharks, right? It's probably confused a lot of people. I drew faces, but so anyway, I started drawing a bunch of portraits, started charging for them. So 8.5 by 11, I started to make money, and I was like, oh, this is pretty nice. Like I can draw faces, I can draw portraits of people, and I think that's kind of when I first got the taste of entrepreneurship, and I started seeing like, oh, I have a talent outside of just football. I have a talent outside of sports. This is something I'm good at. This is something people pay for, and so I started taking all kinds of requests, around Christmas. I was drawing all kinds of things, and basically I realized really quickly is although this is a company, I didn't understand how a company worked, that's for sure, because my expenses, I didn't really profit as much as I probably should have. And so, but the point here is being that it started, I went from depressed poor me to it sparked something. And it sparked something that I think is a big part of why I'm here today, which is I was able to do something, make money, and I kind of got the idea of like, well, if I can do this, what else can, and it started the entrepreneurship seed, if you will. So then I started getting into photography a little bit, and then I started getting into fashion, and I started bartending, and then I started wanting to be a chef and started doing cooking, and then I wanted to be a researcher, so I started researching in different research labs, and then I was an executive assistant at HLT, Higher Learning Technologies Corporation. Then I wanted to dabble in real estate, and so basically what you see here is a big just list of distractions of trying to keep myself busy, and kind of had this this hunger, if you will, to create something. One of the real estate things I tried to do, which I found out from a realtor friend of mine, which was actually like not legal. I had no idea. I was wholesale, and so the whole idea here was that I knew a couple of guys in Iowa City that sold a lot of houses. And I knew specifically through the bartending job a guy that was really good friends with them. And so what I decided to do was I had introduced to these resources online that allowed me to look at houses, to do square footage, and kind of map out things. And I got into the recorders page and started going. I went to several foreclosures and just kind of thought, saw a house get auctioned off, and I'm thinking, man, okay, if I could. So I started looking into that, and I brought my dad to a fortune builders thing. It was just this, you almost did it. So there's this like scam, basically, where they bring you in and they get you all hyped up. It's like a 2-day event, and they feed you a load of crap about how you can get rich off real estate. And all we need is a down payment of like $5,000. It's not really a scam. You could make it something, but like for what they were making, $30,000. Sorry, $5,000, $30,000. Why didn't you do it, Dad? Anyway, so I dabbled in that for a little bit, and then basically wholesaling was you go to a buyer that you know what they like, you know what condos they're looking for, you know all the stuff, and then you go out and do all the dirty hard work. You go and you kind of get the information about the house when it was the value of it. You map out how much you think it would be cost to fix it, and basically the idea is you go to that person that's selling the house and you say, hey, I want to buy this house. And they say, okay, it's like X dollars. You say $10,000, and I say, okay, well, and I need a down payment of $5,000, and you say, all right, well, I'll give you $5,000, but can I have 30 days to give you the down payment? Yeah, that's fine, 30 days to get the down payment. But just prior to actually buying the house, you've gone to your buyer with the big booklet of all the information of the house. You're like, hey, would you buy something like this? Do you like this? And they say, yeah, that would be something I would buy. And you're like, are you sure? Are you really sure? Yeah, I'd buy it. And then you go and you buy the house and you say, perfect, you get the down payment. You say, okay, you sign it, you get the contract, your name's now you're the owner of the house. You take it back to the person that you're selling it to, and you say, hey, here's the contract. If you want to buy the house, I got it now, it's mine. And you want to sell it. It's $10,000, but I need a down payment of $6,000. Whatever. And so basically what you do is, like, if I paid a down payment of $5,000 to this guy, I make this guy pay a down payment of $6,000. I take the $6,000, I pay off the $5,000 down payment here, and say, hey, by the way, this guy sold it. I'm no longer on the contract anymore. You have to deal with this guy. He kind of bought it from me. Blah blah blah. You take the $1,000 for yourself, and you go and you just do this, and it's just totally selling a piece of paper. But it's like super risky because you put down the down payment. And then like this guy decides that he doesn't want it, and then you're anyway. So not a good idea. And then my buddy I was talking to was like, yeah, that's basically being a licensed real estate agent. I was like, oh yeah, I didn't know I do that. So I did that, and then I had this idea with these big boating pads or these big floating raft mats that go out behind boats, and kids like play on them, lay on them, and stuff. And I watched people struggle rolling these things up, and I was like, there should be something to help roll these up easier. So we started going through a bunch of prototyping. I ended up hiring a guy. I pitched it at a couple of school competitions, got like $5,000, went and hired a designer. We designed some concepts, did a 3D model, and then I contacted Paradise Pads, which was a local Des Moines company that was making these pads and competing with Lily Pad, which is they're the big commercial guys that. And so I was working with this mom and pop shop, and they're like trying to find a differentiator, and they thought my role would be the perfect differentiator, and so they gave me a mat, like a $600, one of their prototype mats, and then we had to figure out how to put the rolling mechanism on it, And basically what that ended up turning into as a busy college student and doing a lot of other distractions was, hey, Dad, I got this mat. We should figure out how to make it stronger and be able to make it, you can roll it up easier. And, and then he ended up just designing in the garage with some tools a way to put the roll in the mat. And that was a great idea. He made it strong enough that it could be pulled, and so then it kind of turned into a toboggan behind the thing. And anyway, I tried to work with the guy to, say, hey, can we get this production? But the production costs were too high. He couldn't figure out how to make it something that was scalable. Plus, they were killing it with just their regular flat pad. And so they're like, hey, we need to take care of. We were just like trying to grow like crazy. And right now, our sales are booming with this. Maybe in a couple of years, maybe something that turns out. I don't know. My dad might have to bargain for like 50% ownership or something because he basically did all the work. But that was also something that just kind of failed, right? So I wanted to make that clear that there was a couple of things in my life that I tried, failed before I got to where I'm at now. I think that's important. Because you don't really hear about those usually, And so also, just taking a step back, after my accident, I had a dream, like during my accident, and take it for what you want. If you think it's total bullshit, that's fine, but maybe it was the drugs, I don't know. But after the accident, I had a dream, or during the accident, kind of shortly thereafter, I had a dream, and the dream was that I was looking at myself in the hospital bed, and then it was kind of like Google Earth, like like really quickly, and then I was just remember complete darkness, but then everything was particles, right? Just like everything was particles, and I felt like I was one with the particles, and I didn't have like a body anymore, but I was just like infinity in all directions, right? And it's just like huge, vast, whoa feeling, and this is like the closest I can possibly articulate it. Is the Matrix. It just kind of felt like everything was dots. And after that experience, after that dream, I thought of my life in differently and kind of from that perspective of dots. And I've always told some of my family, I feel in a lot of ways guided. And what I started to do is what you see here is a lot of distractions, like a lot of distractions, a lot of just like, punching at air. And I was suffering because of it. I health-wise probably wasn't the healthiest, and just not sleeping and just doing all this stuff. And I saw that, okay, you could be successful as a businessman and just hustling and grinding all the time and have no life. And so I kind of got a little bit of that. But anyway, the point here is there's tons of distractions when I wasn't thinking and just doing. Part of the distraction to kind of get over this identity change crisis that I was going through. But there was a couple of just situations in my life where I started to try to get better at looking at those dots and recognizing those dots. And one of them was the same Michael Moon that we go through that little talk at the beginning before we go to a conference to get on the same level and mentally. And he talked about if you could explain and depict your life, like how you view your world, because we all view our world differently, how would you explain it? And I said, well, I kind of brought up the Matrix thing. I said, I don't know. I just feel like if you were in a room right now, this is a room, I would see lots of data points, a lot of dots, right, everywhere. Everybody would have their own little unique dot, but there'd be some dots that were just glowing a little bit more than others, meaning that I felt a little bit more attracted to them for whatever reason. I didn't know why or what or for what reason, but I just knew. And I started listening to this a lot more, and I started paying attention to this in my own life. And I started, every single time I went anywhere, I was just kind of having this feeling of this being guided and looking for these dots that attracted me. And one of them was getting into the entrepreneurship, and we were sitting in this in Iowa in this room for, I can't remember what it was for. It was like some student entrepreneur thing, and I'm sitting there and I'm telling my story, and this kid Eric stands up and talks a little bit about his research, and I'm like, oh, he's smart. He's really smart. And so at the time, I was trying to do something with my brachial, do a project in the brachial plexus, and so I was trying to map out the brachial plexus digitally so that you could make a better diagnostic of a brachial plexus, so you don't wait 8 months and decide maybe I should do the transplant or I should not. And then they open you up and they're like, oh yeah, it was horrible. Yeah, it never came back. I was like, why? I should have known that like beforehand or like maybe immediately after it happened. It would have been nice to know. And so if we could make a diagnostic tool for brachial plexus, that would be great. And there wasn't anything out there from what I did my initial research. And so, but anyway, I met Eric, and I was like, man, hey, Eric, this is kind of my idea. And he's like, oh, that's really cool. I know how to do that. You a computer scientist? And I was like, nope. And he's like, well, I am. And I said, okay. And I kind of started talking to him about this idea and getting him really pumped up and jazzed up about it. And then simultaneously, we were at Christmas at my grandma Cease's house. Carl Welke, who is a family member of mine and also an orthopedic or cardiothoracic transplant surgeon, he was looking at a heart offer on his phone and showing me like how they did the offering process via iMessage. I'm like, whoa, is that secure? And he goes, yeah, probably not. You know, I mean, I don't really know anything about security, but I'd assume not. And then I'm like, that's how you view information about a heart is on a cell phone and iMessage. And they're like, yeah, I mean, yeah, usually a phone call, but you know, sometimes I'm sleeping. I don't really quite remember what they said, and so it's nice to go back and look at things and also to send pictures and stuff. So you're like sending pictures of heart, organs, offer, yeah, all through iMessage. Like, whoa. And so then I took that problem back to Eric and I said, Eric, dude, you never believe it. You know how they do heart transplants? Because I was doing some research in tissue transplant too. And I had brought that up to Eric as well. Because basically he's a really smart dude and I'm just like trying to fit him somewhere. And I said, hey, Eric, did you know about this organ transplant deal? It's like this crazy thing. He's like, yeah, no, really, that's crazy. I said, yeah, man. He's like, yeah, I have 4 aunts waiting for life-saving liver transplants. That's kind of frustrating. I'm like, whoa. You do? He's like, yeah, I have 4 aunts waiting for life-saving liver transplants and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, cool. So then immediately, just like we went through earlier where I had you go through that rhetoric of like that ownership, right? Immediately started seeing an opportunity where we could maybe make an improvement in this space. And it was now to get super academic, laser focused on getting his PhD, Eric, to consider a huge change to say, okay, yeah, you can still work on school, but yeah, by the way, like let's try to start a company on this. And so it was kind of this process where we did about a year of research. We started lining up meetings with doctors, and that's what I'm good at. I'm a good hustler, I think. I take pride in being able to get a meeting with a surgeon. You have to know their secretary. That's the trick. But started lining up all these meetings with doctors and surgeons. And then started bringing Eric along, and and anyway, basically 1 year later, he is in it. And I'm in it. And we went up to Minneapolis, and we were working on it with this. Before that, Dr. Manny Villafana. This guy up in the right, he's most famously known for starting St. Jude Medical, the bileaflet heart valve company. He, out of all prosthetics in the world, his prosthetics are more people than any other prosthetic in the world. The bileaflet heart valve company, St. Jude Medical in Minneapolis, now employs hundreds and hundreds, got acquired by Abbott Technology just last year for $22 billion. This guy knows how to start companies. He's done it 7 times. He's got 7 public companies that he's done through his career. And so this guy knows business, and Eric just happened to be making a presentation about his thesis and about his academic work at Iowa, and to the TIPI Advisory Board member, which is just a group of board members at Iowa that are former alumni. And Eric, I was talking to him afterwards, he's like, at the very last 5 minutes, I decided to kind of throw something out about the transplant project that I was working on with you. And so he's giving a spiel about academic work, and he said, oh yeah, by the way, I'm working on a startup, help an entrepreneur do some of the technical work behind this idea of matching organs better and allocating organs better and trying to reduce organ discard. And Manny's wife was sitting in the crowd, and Manny's wife had just got done reading a transcript for an organ transplant doctor. She had proofread it for him and spell checked it for him, so read the whole thing. And it was like, oh my gosh, I just read a book about transplant, literally finished it like 2 days ago, understand everything about it. One of my husband's best friends was Dr. Christian Barnard, which by the way is the guy that first do a heart transplant ever. And I'm like, so you have to come up and meet him. And so Eric came back to me, he's like, dude, we have to go to Minneapolis. I just met this lady, and so we went, and we showed up at Manny's office, and Manny says, hey, gentlemen, he's like a real, anyway. Everybody should meet Manny Villafana. He's like he's a character. But basically he was like, all right, guys, so go ahead, sit down in 1 second. I got it in 1 second. And he just kind of does that all the time where like he'll just like leave or like just, anyway. So he's like, all right, guys, 1 second. He just leaves the room and he comes back 5 minutes later with this woman. And he's like, all right, guys, I brought Susan Gunderson here. You know, I have friends in transplant, but I don't really know how it works. And so Susan is the CEO of LifeSource, which is an organ procurement organization, which is one of our customers in Minneapolis. And we're like, ooh, because this is kind of still like napkin drawing idea stuff. Susan Gunderson was like, and Manny goes, all right, boys, you know, do your presentation. Susan, boys are going to present. Susan, tell me if it's a good idea or not. All right, guys, go. And I was like, okay. So we pitched it, and then afterwards, Susan was like, Manny's like, well, Susan, what do you think? And Susan's like, well, you guys have things to learn, but it's a very complex process. The concept, though, is there. The waste is real. Yeah, I mean, I would help support you. And Manny's like, all right, enough said. Thank you, Susan. Gentlemen, I'm going to watch Susan out. So he walks Susan out, comes back about 10 minutes later, and says, all right, I'm in. And so he said, we thought, all right, like, where's the check? You know, are we going to make an investment? And he said, you know, I'm not going to invest just yet. I want you guys to go out and raise your own non-dilutive capital. I want you to come back with a match. And so go raise some money, finish the idea. Susan's here is going to help you. We actually, the very next day, set up a phone call. Susan, we went up there for 1 week straight and watched transplants, just back to front, for an entire week from all different perspectives, and learned a lot, and came out of that week with the MVP product. Took that back to Iowa City, hired an outsourced development firm to build up the first concepts, and then off we went. And then we went out and raised a bunch of non-dilutive capital through competitions, and took that back to Manny, and Manny was like, well, you know, like, maybe if you had a little bit more money, I would, you know. And so then we went back and ended up getting an SBIR grant, and then we ended up getting a guy, one of our first angels, out of Iowa, just an insurance salesman in Storm Lake, Iowa. Great guy, knew him through a mutual connection, golfed 18 holes with him. And then after golf, he's like, all right, so, you know, what do you need in? And like, oh, you know, we're trying to raise $250,000, and anyway, made the first investment, and then we took that money to Manny. Actually, what we did is we had said, hey, Mr. Investor from Storm Lake, Manny Villafana, this is this guy with all this track record. He's going to invest if you do it. And he's like, oh, is that right? He said, yeah. And then, you know, we just kind of played them too. But anyway, both of them, Mike was the sucker that pulled the trigger first. We took his check up to Manny and said, Manny, he signed. And then so Manny signed. And then after Manny put in money, then kind of money was a lot easier to find because we said, hey, Manny invested. Anyway, so started seeing dots. Cooper was a big part of this story too, around the same time as I met Eric. And started learning more things about transplant from Carl very early on. We had a family friend, Cooper, that was dying from heart failure. And needed a life-saving heart transplant. And so I had seen the kind of the transplant side of things, and then going in and seeing a kid struggle for his life and his whole family suffer when you know half of them are being wasted was kind of the point where Eric and I were like, all right, we got to do something about this. You know, this is just not right. And then most recently, there's been an additional dot in my life that also, I think I think having the right woman in your life is very important to keeping things on the track. I think, anyway, I found another dot that helps me and keeps me inspired. It's the first woman I've ever met, actually first person ever that works harder than me. Olivia actually just found out on March 16th, match day, that she got her #1 choice for her residency program. And so she's going out to Ortho Carolina in Charlotte. I'll be splitting half my time there now too, so a new home for us both. But like, if we could take like a little quick round of applause for Olivia Rice getting her first thing. Yeah, pretty cool. Doesn't happen. It's extremely competitive, very hard to get into, and so yeah, she's a rock star. Okay, so organ discard, huge problem. We started looking at the problem a little bit more. 54% of all donated organs get wasted, which is a huge, huge number. In fact, that's around 45,000 organs that are getting discarded every single year. Which has led to what the United States refers to as the organ shortage crisis, with over 122,000 men, women, children waiting for life-saving transplants. 22 people die every single day while waiting. So growing problem. Last year was record highs for these numbers too. So this is an increasingly growing problem. Discarded organs. This discarded organs not only has huge impact on lives, but it also has huge impacts on dollars. Discarded organs result in lost foregone revenues upwards of $30 billion for not only the healthcare, not only hospitals, but the healthcare system and payers, particularly CMS. Every single year, CMS, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, the government spends 1/3 of their entire healthcare budget on dialysis, which is a big part of that $30 billion. Kidney transplants are very much encouraged by the government because it not only adds an additional 9 quality adjusted life years for the patient, meaning they live 9 years longer than they would if they continued to be on dialysis. It also saves the government immediately $2.4 million over those 9 years of avoiding dialysis costs, of which they pay for out of pocket. So it's a huge economic incentive, which is in part why we've been really lucky to be able to receive grant funding. The problem, the organ supply chain is broken. When we look at the entire supply chain from the time that, I'm just going to walk through the supply chain quickly just to make sure that everybody understands kind of how this process works because there's a lot that goes into it. Let's say that there's a car accident in Des Moines. They're rushed to, let's say, Methodist, Unity Point Health Methodist Trauma Center. And unfortunately, they're pronounced deceased. The family comes. They talk with the family. They get authorization and consent. So the family, even though they're a donor, still has to approve the transplant, which is an important note to make. Like if you want for sure your organs to be transplanted, put it in your will. Or make it very clear that that's what you want to do with your family. Because at the end of the day, next in kin makes the final decision. So they go there, get authorization, and then these coordinators, the organ procurement organization, so their emergency response takes them to a donor hospital. Organ procurement organization takes a coordinator that's trained on how to deal with donors and donors' families and how to make that patient, care for that patient as if they were still alive. Takes all that organ information runs all these labs, takes all that data, and puts it on the government database called UNOS, or United Network for Organ Sharing, DonorNet. And what they do is they match it to their huge list of recipients. And so for each of the organs, there's 8 organs. The government spits back to this organ procurement organization 8 lists with thousands of potential recipients, rank ordered, of which currently the OPO coordinator, who is a trained nurse, who's also taking care of the donor, ordering labs, managing the ICU floor, managing that patient or now donor, also putting things in the EMR, also coordinating with their team at the organ procurement organization, and also responsible for offering out organs. And so he or she picks up the phone and says, okay, left kidney, Dr. So-and-so representing patient number 1. Dr. So-and-so, you have a patient listed primary for this kidney. Would you like to accept or deny? It's 2 a.m. in the morning. Doctor gets on the, answers the phone. It's like, what's the creatinine? What's the A1C? What's the cause of death? What's the age? And they're going through this back and forth dialogue of which is not documented. And that's how it's done right now. And basically what happens is that process back and forth takes so long that by the time it takes so long to get a response that the organs expire by the time they can get in place. So very often you have a couple kidneys or a couple organs that go, usually kidneys that get placed pretty quickly, and then you're trying to place these other organs. And a lot of these organs are not nearly very good organs or not clearly bad organs. They're kind of in this middle area, and the doctor has to make a decision whether or not to transplant it back and forth in a dialogue at 2 a.m. in the morning with very limited information. And so basically a lot of organs that could be transplanted get skipped for purposes of they don't have enough information to make a good decision, and also they're economically incentivized to just pass. An organ going bad costs them much, much more than if they just wait for another one that might be better. So they're economically incentivized to just say, pass, we'll wait for a better organ. And that's why the wait list continues to grow. And anyway, so let's say that out of the 8 organs, 4 of them are placed. So 4 of them are placed. Kidneys are going to Texas. And usually they split them. So maybe the right kidney is going to Texas, left kidney is going to Florida, liver's going to New York, and lungs are going to Chicago. Now this organ procurement organization, who's also taking care of the donors, that's doing all this back and forth calling work, ordering labs, managing the donor, now has to arrange logistics for this transplant center team. So these transplant centers are the different states, Florida, Texas, et cetera. They have to fly usually around 4 people minimum to the donor hospital location. So now they're all flying into Des Moines, right? And they all have to get there. And then they have to find an OR room and coordinate OR room and get all the staff and people. All these doctors have never worked with each other, which brings up their own issues. You get them all into a room. You excise the organs. Meanwhile, as cross clamp is happening, where they stop the heart and they're starting to pack ice around the organs and then get ready to remove them. There's also people that are there to coordinate with the recipient teams. So the heart team that's in New York, for example, the surgeon does the initial review. They open up the chest. They say, yep, heart looks good. They look at an echo and they say, yep, this thing's good. Tell the team back home that we're coming back with it. And so then they call the team back home and say, hey, get the recipient ready. They're coming back with the heart. So then by the time that they get the organ and put it in the perfusion slush, that has 4 hours the minute it gets removed from the body to have to go into a patient, right? So they're flying it directly to New York, and by the time that they get there, that recipient needs to be opened up, ready to get the heart. And they hand off the cooler, the igloo cooler, not joking, and they take the cooler and they put the organ in. So all of that right now is managed on phones and text messaging. Those 2 bottlenecks, there's a lot of bottlenecks here. There's waste throughout this entire supply chain. We focused on 2 bottlenecks. Why? We looked at what could be immediately solvable with technology, concepts that we knew were out there. We're not inventing some new technology that's completely out of this world, right? Fairly simple, secure communication, right? Okay, so something that could be immediately solvable with existing technology or technology concepts that are out there. 2, huge upside potential economically for these institutions. And 3, it can't change workflows very much. If you have a new product, if you're a young entrepreneur, you're a young company, and you're trying to sell a product to a hospital, you have a lot of things going against you if you're young and your first time trying to sell a hospital. The last thing you need is, hey, by the way, this is this new product. It's great. It's going to save you so much money, and then you have to change everything. So it has to be something that matches their existing workflows, so there's very little disruption. And so that's what we chose. When the first place that we're getting into is this first bottleneck here is when we make an offer out to a surgeon. So now instead of a phone call, now what happens is, let's say I'm the OPO here. I'm at the donor hospital. I have the organ information. I get the match list back from the U.S. government. I see patient number 1. I look for that doctor's name in the application. His application pops up, or his contact pops up. I select his contact. The surgeon has uploaded his organ preferences already, so that surgeon has specific information that they want in order to make a good decision. So and by the way, it's completely subjective, surgeon to surgeon. They all look at organs differently and make decisions differently and need different information. And so I see everything that he needs. I put in the information. I send it, he or she. I send it. They get the information, they look over the offer, they respond with a decision, they can add in their team. On average, about 40 people need to know what's going on in order to make a decision and final acceptance on an offer. They're adding people in, it's a more collaborative, it's all secure, it's all documented for audit purposes later. And that's what we're doing on the high level, is just streamlining all of that communication optimization. Our goal is to increase offer throughput. If we can get them to offer more organs faster, the probability of acceptance goes up, theoretically, right? You offer more, you have a higher end going in, the probabilities of matching is higher. So the next piece that we're doing is, now that we have all that surgeon information and data, we can start to look at a large perspective. We say, okay, what are these surgeons looking at, and then match it to their outcomes that are all public, right? So we can say these surgeons are looking at these things. Their metrics are very successful. They have 98% post-graft success, meaning that they do very good job. These surgeons are looking at these things, not so good. And so because it's so subjective, and you can take a kidney and say 50% of this, you could split the room in half, and you all be surgeons that said, yeah, I'd transplant that any day. And you'd ask these surgeons, they'd say, no way in hell would I ever transplant it. So we can start to educate the industry, right, with data, which is important. And then the other thing is, we have every single transplant since 1980 in our database through the partnership with the United Network of Organ Sharing. And so what we can do is, when a surgeon is getting that organ offer, they can have an ability to look for historicals or request historicals. Our app, an intelligent chatbot, will scan that organ offer. It'll go back in 1980 and try to find every single transplant like it that's been done and what their success outcomes were, and within seconds give it to the doctor, so the doctor can say, okay, I've transplanted an organ like this before. In fact, I've done 5 with a post-graft success rate after year 1 of 79%. Okay, good. And can move forward with the process using data. and not just a subjective decision. So our traction, we have 4 clinically pilots live that are operating on our system to date. One of those has converted over to a paying customer early this year, which was a huge accomplishment and exciting. Revenue is kind of a big deal in a startup. 100 plus transplant performed on our application thus far. Close to 80% of all kidney imports, meaning kidneys coming into Iowa, go through our application to find its match, which is pretty cool. And I think we've had a couple situations where we've known people that have gotten transplants, and we know, especially for kidney, that there's a very high percentage and a chance that our app was used to do that. So it's really cool. 350 transplant surgeons and clinicians that are on the board on using the application to date. Our team, along with myself and Eric, we have longtime transplant surgeon Dr. Robert Emery, who is since retired and now works for us. He is also the PI of our NIH grant. He is best friends. He actually introduced so Christian Barnard, the first guy to ever do a heart transplant, trained with Dr. Robert Emery in South Africa. Christian Barnard and Manny Villafana, they went on their honeymoons together with their wives. I mean, they're like best pals. But the reason that Manny knew him was because of Bob. So anyway, so we knew Bob because of Manny. John Slump, he's raised over $40 million in the Midwest. He is a hustler. He is, if he was here, he'd probably smell, and he'd probably be wondering who let the homeless guy in. And the dude's raised $40 million. He's unreal. Actually, just this morning, I was in St. Louis presenting at an investor presentation. He called me and said, "Hey man, I just got here." It's like 10 minutes until the networking breakfast starts. "Hey, I just got here. Do you have your hotel key, or where you at?" I'm like, "I'm at the conference already." And, "Oh, can you leave your hotel key down at the," because I stayed at a different hotel across the street. He said, "Oh, can you leave the hotel down at the concierge? I'll come grab it. I need a shower." And so he came down, grabbed my key, went and showered, showed up just in time for the meeting, and ended up walking away with $1 million for another company that he helps raise money for, which is Corvita Medical, which is a company that he started, which is a closed system drug transfer device. They've been through 4 rounds of financing. They're kind of a big company now, and he's leaving, and we're pulling him in now full time. So excited about that. And then Jacob Veal, he is our first full-time engineer, and he's working on the product every single day. Hans Johnson is a professor, health informatics professor from the University of Iowa, and we knew him through Eric, and he's kind of our senior architect. You know, like when we go to build something, and I wouldn't do it that way. He's kind of the wise guy there from the tech side. And then we have some surgeons that are on our board that help us as we continue to expand and grow, either by contributing as a customer or pilot site, or contributing as a significant contributor to our grants and or an investor of our company. The future, we want to be the platform for transplant. So I brought up that supply chain of all those different bottlenecks. Those different bottlenecks we have full intention of solving eventually. We have to solve and earn the right to win. We have to find and solve these problems that we're working on now and earn the right to try to solve the others later. But this kind of talks through everything that I just talked about with the AI, the artificial intelligent chatbot that goes and sources data and information. Right now, a huge other part of the waste is actually authorization. And so a lot of times when somebody passes away at the hospital, those nurses don't actually call the organ procurement organization. So by the time that the organ procurement organization finds out that there's been someone that passed away that was a donor, it's too late. They hadn't been taking the proper precautions to make sure that those organs and the patient continues to be taken care of as if they were still alive, so those organs can be recovered. So that's a huge bottleneck right now that happens over a phone call. It's a conflict of interest for the nurse because the nurse, as they're trying to save someone's life, has to call the Grim Reaper, kind of. It's kind of from a nurse's perspective, they think of it as giving up on their patient. I have to call the OPO to let them know that this person's probably going to die and that they need to get here soon so that we can make do with the organs. You know, and so a lot of them that aren't educated on transplant and donation choose to not make that phone call, and that's a huge, huge problem. In fact, based on how many people sign up to be donors, and based on the number of deaths that happen in the United States every single year in the United States, there should be 34,000 donors that get authorized for donation based on those numbers. The United States sees around 9,000 donors a year. So it's a huge, huge issue, and that's where we're going to be focusing next. And one of the ways that we're going to be doing that is there's this thing called a glass coma scale. It's a metric that they take with eye movements to determine basically brain death and if this person's alive or passed, and just how far, just how close they are to death. And it comes out and it produces a score, and that score goes into the EMR. And what we will do is we'll integrate with those EMRs so that when that score is inputted, all the nurse is doing her job trying to save this patient. They're taking the test, they put the test in, it hits a Glasgow coma scale of a certain number. Every single OPO has their different metrics. It'll automatically notify the OPO, who can send people on site passively and be there just in case. So that's where we think we can make a real improvement there. There's also these new things, these organ perfusion pumps, kidney pumps, lung and heart boxes. They're putting organs in pumps now that make them extend the life of the organ. So for example, for kidneys, they've been doing these for a while. Kidneys, there's a pump, and it just pumps super cold ice cold saline solution through it to keep the organ perfused. And then it's a little carry-on thing, and you can actually see a lot. They take a lot of pictures of the pump numbers because surgeons want to know, hey, what's the numbers on the pump, on the kidney? What's the numbers on the pump? And the nurses will give them updates by taking pictures of the thing. Well, why not be able to integrate directly to those perfusion machines? Why not every single time that why isn't there a live feed from that organ that those surgeons are able to see that? So we're working with a couple companies, very high level now, to be able to integrate and kind of do an Internet of Things play with their devices to be able to make sure that that data is streaming directly to our product. The other thing is, the other thing about that is right now there's no tracking on them. So hey, we left at they were supposed to be there by now. Where's the organ at, et cetera, et cetera. It's not uncommon for a right kidney to get excised, put in a cooler, a left kidney to get excised and put in a cooler, and having those go the wrong places. And that happens quite frequently. In fact, every single year, around 7% of all the donated organs end up going to the wrong place. So that's around 9,000 organs. That's not good. Or the pump starts to run out of solution and dries up, and they go down to get the kidney. This happened last month at a hospital I cannot disclose in the state, where there was they went down to go get the kidney, and they realized that the pump had a leak, and all the saline solution ran out, and it had been pumping dry. They got the patient under anesthetics, opened up, ready to get the kidney. They go down to get the kidney's dry and unusable. The patient wakes up with a scar and says, yeah, sorry, sir, didn't work out. We messed up. So there's a way to be monitoring these pumps better than keeping them in a basement and going down and checking on them every once in a while. And that's another area of expansion that we think is possible. So out of all of this information, and I kind of started at the beginning of talking about some of the learnings and some of the ways to create this tribe and create a company, and some of the things I learned through my trials and tribulations, through going through the accident and having to do an identity change and saying, football is who I am, this is what I do, this is me, to now all of a sudden having to change and going through that process of trying to figure out what now, et cetera. And there's some things that I took away, and if there's anything that you remember, these are 3 things that I think are important that I remind myself of often. Is you can't follow the dots, and this is something I struggle. These are things I struggle with still. These are key takeaways of which I learned that I can do to be more successful. 1, you can't follow the dots, the dot theory idea, when you're limiting yourself by acting on validation and an image that is created from outside sources. Meaning, if you are constantly trying to, if you give yourself an image of what you think other people see you as, Dalton's a football player, he doesn't draw, for example, you'll severely be limiting yourself, right? So that's lesson number 1. 2, switch your perspective from past, future to present. It's important to learn from your past. It's important to have faith in the future. But I think that if you're too focused on those and not focused on right now, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities. You're going to miss a lot of those dots. Number 3, commit yourself to the idea of limitless potential and have that abundance mindset, and then hold on. Because when you start to really have faith in that idea of abundance, and limitless abundance, you'd be surprised what enters your life. And if you are paying attention to the present and you're making sure that you are constantly seeking for self-validation and self-image, you'll be able to see them, and it's a hell of a ride. So thank you for inviting me back to present to where this all started. It's been an honor, and I guess next steps unknown, but I know that it's going to be a ride, and I'm excited for it. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. We really appreciate your attendance. I wanted to remind you that on Tuesday, April 10th, Matthew Ruda will also be here to do our next installment in this series. And he is also a young Oskaloosa native and was also in the Forbes 30 under 30. So we are blessed in our community to have some great young people out doing some wonderful things in the world. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you in a couple weeks.